off by saying and spelling your first and last name.
Kevin Metcalf, Kevinmetcalf.
Audio good on that?
Yeah, we're going now.
All right, cool. Tell me a little bit, just a brief history over, the work you've done and what you currently do for a living.
So the work I've done, that goes back many years. So I've done military, state, local, federal law enforcement. I was a prosecutor for probably 12, 13 years. In that prosecutorial role, I really got involved in technology and where technology touches criminal behavior. And when I got into that, that led me into everything where a crime was committed carrying a cell phone, if you can imagine that, which is everything. So my focus earlier in life was on terrorism, the drugs, and more typical things. When I started prosecuting, I really started seeing where technology was influencing and increasing the reach of criminal behavior, especially when it comes to kids. And that's really where my focus shifted. I wanted to look more into technology and how we can do better on investigations, because we were losing a lot.
What do you do now?
I'm the director of the Human Trafficking Response Unit for the Oklahoma Attorney General's Office.
How long have you done that?
Done that since June, so what is it, eight months now?
Oh, nice. That's awesome. So tell me a little about, like we were just talking about, the human smuggling case. California had an Oklahoma tie. What have you heard, and kind of what's your reaction professionally?
Well, I just glanced at it, so I don't have any knowledge in depth of anything that's going on. But I did have a lot of reaction from here in Oklahoma with questions on trafficking.
Yeah.
So and just to take a step back, I was in New York City, presenting at a couple of places there on trafficking this week, working with a bunch of other experts. So when I took a look at the original, or I guess one of the main stories, it talked about the smuggling of, I think, 20,000 people into the United States. Well, this is a common problem, and one of the things that my job entails is public education. So there were a couple of polls done here in Oklahoma a year or so ago asking, is human trafficking a problem? And about 80-something% said yes. And then a little bit later, there's another question, is human trafficking a problem here in Oklahoma? And only about 21% of the people said, yeah, it's a problem here in Oklahoma. We always think of it as a problem somewhere else. So this is an educational time, and we really have to educate the people here in our state to what's really going on. So we have to deal with a lot of mythology, a lot of myths that are going on. For example, in New York City, one of the questions that we were asked was, do traffickers really use these zip ties and put them on car handles? You've probably seen these.
Yeah.
Absolute nonsense. I mean,
Really?
all that's nonsense. And what that does is create the perception that the movie Taken, for example, or something like that, that's how trafficking occurs. Now, to back up on the smuggling, there is a lot of confusion on human trafficking and human smuggling.
Okay.
So for human smuggling, you're looking at people who want to come into the country, but they don't want to, for whatever reason, they can't come in through legal means or valid means. So they will pay a coyote, as you've probably heard that term. They'll pay somebody to bring them in, let's say from Mexico into the U.S. Now, just because they cross over from Mexico into the U.S., they could be from anywhere, any other country that's not a U.S., and they are not a U.S. citizen. They want to come in to the U.S. So in order to get there, you've got to pay somebody. And there is organized crime, there's a lot of things that are involved in that, because it's big money, trying to come into the U.S. so you can come here, work, send money back. But smuggling is not the same as trafficking. So human smuggling, you're basically transporting somebody from an outside country into the U.S. and they want to be transported here. They will pay the coyote or the smuggler to get into this country, and that's how they do it. So when you look at trafficking, human trafficking, and it may be that we have stayed with an unfortunate terminology on this, because most people think of trafficking as transporting somebody from one place to another, when in reality you don't have to transport anybody. Human trafficking, and I really hate using legal definitions for everybody, but it's the use of force, fraud, and coercion. You'll hear those terms used. But when you look at it at its basic level, it's criminal. Could be an individual criminal, could be like a disorganized group, could be anything, but people who are exploiting another person for profit. So when you get to that level, that looks like a whole lot of different things.
Okay. So how I read it was trafficking deals with a lot more exploitation.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at money on both ends of the spectrum.
Okay.
Smugglers get paid to bring somebody into the country so they can go about their business. Trafficking is where some person profits off of the, let's say, work, or in a lot of cases sex, but they'll profit off of the activities of another person. And that's, you know, so they're both financially driven, and there can be overlap. I mean, on the journey here into this country, there can be rape, trafficking, any sorts of horrors that await those people that are paying criminals to bring them in here. And once they get here, people, let's say from China, here in the U.S., especially in Oklahoma, we see them coming into the illegal grows and the marijuana, cannabis. You know, I'm sure you've seen all the issues we're having over that.
Yes.
And that is a lot more of a decentralized, organized network, but we're seeing a lot of the immigrants being taken advantage of, and they may be lured into this country under false pretenses, like, hey, come in, we'll get you a job, you can go to school, or you know, just having work in some of these countries is a big thing. So being able to come here and earn enough money to send some back. And quite honestly, there are a lot of people that are leaving situations in their country where they may have an idea they are being exploited here, but they're still making a lot more money and still sending a lot more money back home, you know, than they would if they had stayed where they were. So a lot of these victims are willing to put up with that even though they know they're being exploited.
It almost sounds like, can smuggling lead to possible trafficking as well?
Absolutely.
That's the overlap you're talking about.
That's the overlap. Now, smuggling in and of itself is not, I mean, it's not trafficking, but so what are they being smuggled for? That can be another question, and that I don't have the answer to. I didn't look at this, but if you're looking at 20,000 people, I wouldn't be shocked to see that there was some human trafficking involved in that after they got into the country, but I can't say for sure.
I mean, seeing a bus that involved 20,000 people being smuggled over the last 5 years, would you say there had to be a ton of work on all sides to get this done?
Yes, and without any more information than just the 20,000 coming into the country, I read a news article on it. It's about all my exposure in this, but you have groups that are controlling access to coming over. This is a business. Mm-hmm. It's a business model, it's a criminal business model, but still, you're going to have certain groups controlling who can cross and who can gather and who can perform the smuggling. So when you start looking at that, how do you get there? People are coming from South America, so there are a lot of things that have to happen to come together to gather up, to have a staging area in Mexico, load everybody on, or maybe try to bring them in through a waterway, which you know, may or may not work. You know, the Border Patrol, Coast Guard, you got a lot of people down that know all the tricks. Tunnels are hidden. You know, there are a lot of ways to get them in, but you got to pay the price.
So I want to ask what.
Real quick,
Yep.
I'm gonna go grab another battery. This one's fine right now, but it's about to run out. So
Okay,
you guys can just keep going.
keep going. Just want to let you know you're leaving. Yep. Sounds good. I want to ask you the same question that you guys put on that poll. Is human trafficking a problem in Oklahoma?
Massive problem.
How so? What's the extent?
It's a problem everywhere. It's as old as humanity. It's around, and it will continue to be around. You see a lot of these groups that say we're here to end human trafficking. Well, that's not going to happen ever, but we can do a lot better, and we have to do a lot better. So human trafficking, what you'll see mainly is going to be familial trafficking, or the trafficking of a person by a family member, especially when you get into looking at kids or people with disabilities, or even the elderly. So we're not talking necessarily about sex in all these. That's what really catches everybody. Everybody in the country knows about one type, and it's all sex. And then everybody thinks that it's somebody who's been kidnapped or taken, you know, like the movies show. That's what everybody thinks, and that's why these myths are so important, that we address these and use the right terminology and understand what we're talking about. But familial trafficking, the trafficking of a person by a family member. So most trafficking happens by somebody that person knows, and it could be another very common variation is Romeo trafficking or boyfriend trafficking. Matter of fact, you'll hear a lot of these victims refer to their trafficker as their boyfriend. There's usually a romance, especially if you get somebody who's a bit naive or low self-esteem or something like that. The romantic engagement starts, and then after a while they will be manipulated or tricked into doing things, like maybe a fake modeling agency, or hey, I just need you to do this one time. We're really short on money. I just need you to have sex with this guy, and you know, then that'll be it. Well, that's just the start. And a lot of times the boyfriend or familial trafficking, you know, drugs will come into the picture either as a control mechanism or as a coping mechanism. So those two are the primary that we see here and everywhere else, just to be honest about it.
I think when we broke that human smuggling story earlier this week, it was a big California news conference, and everyone's like, whoa, there was an Oklahoma tie.
Right.
People were being smuggled through Oklahoma, like you said. We feel like that's not happening here.
Right.
I get the feeling that you weren't surprised to see that.
Absolutely not.
Can you tell us a little bit about the efforts in Oklahoma about these issues?
Yes, but first, the smuggling, you know, bringing 20,000 people, where do they all go? And why do they only go to California, or why do they only go to Florida or New York? Yeah, Oklahoma, we've got, if you look at, well, let's go back to trafficking. Bringing all these people in, there are people wanting to profit off of them when they get here. You got a lot of people that are here illegal in this country, get them over here, take their documents, and then, I mean, look at Oklahoma, agriculture. Look at how many slaughterhouses we have, how many poultry processing plants we have. We have a lot of things here where they can really blend in, or the cannabis industry. So no, there wasn't really a shock to see an Oklahoma tie with a smuggling operation, because there are jobs here, there are people here that are not here legally, and they're all over the country. Now our efforts here in Oklahoma, so the Attorney General, so Gettner Drummond, got hired to come in here and fill a role as the director of the Human Trafficking Response Unit. So over the last 10 years or so, I've had a major focus on child exploitation, human trafficking, and other crimes where technology played a role. And I've done a lot of work around the country and around the world. So I've probably been in 20 countries in the last several years, including Afghanistan, Pakistan, Colombia, Dominican, Montenegro, Europe, UK. I've been in a lot of different countries doing a lot of work. When I started looking back at what I'd been doing, it seemed very kind of shallow. You're jumping from one country to another, doing operations, training. So I wanted something with a little more depth. And I had been working with the AG's office prior to that to help kind of create what this unit would look like, and just got the job offer, and I thought, well, this looks pretty good, so I'll come and take it. I like the way it was written, and I like the focus of it. So in Oklahoma, prior to me getting here, we had OBN, Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics. They've got a great crew, but it's small, and they don't have unlimited resources. They do a great job. They've got the entire state. Then Tulsa PD Vice, they're doing an amazing job. Some actually cutting edge stuff that I was very surprised to see when I got here, pleasantly surprised. And Oklahoma City Vice, they are doing a great job there, working well with victim service providers and others. But really, outside of Tulsa and Oklahoma City, there wasn't a whole lot going on. Now, I've heard there are pockets of agencies out here in the state that I have still not connected with yet that are doing things and trying to do more. But really, if you're not in Tulsa or Oklahoma City, there's not a whole lot being done out here. And to be fair, law enforcement has a million things that they have to do. It's not just human trafficking. That's my focus, but that's not their only focus. So they've got a whole lot of other things to do. Drunk drivers, domestic violence. There's any number of things they have to focus on. And human trafficking is a very complex crime, and you really need a lot of training to be up to date on really how to deal with it at a law enforcement level. So that's my focus. So the Human Trafficking Response Unit, first we were tasked with building a database. So Jared Mason with the AG's office is building that database. It can be pretty complex. One part of it is looking at victim service providers. How do we provide services for these victims? And we need wraparound services. Another side of it is law enforcement intelligence and a lot of the networking. But then there's privacy issues, there are cybersecurity issues, we had to build an infrastructure. So there's a lot going into that alone. Another responsibility I've got is training victim service providers and training law enforcement, and also providing investigative support for law enforcement. When we get down to the third, I think, it's to look into the policies of Oklahoma agencies, provide training, and also provide help on developing policies that will help them to be more aware and, you know, trauma-informed, victim-centered on dealing with victims. Then the last two are public service announcements and dealing with grants. But that big overview, what we're doing this year in 25, I've reached out to my network. So Truckers Against Trafficking, Oklahoma-based, Oklahoma-founded. I don't know if are you familiar with them?
I am not.
So they have been around for a number of years, well respected. They are coming in to do our focus on transportation and energy sectors. So you're looking at truck drivers, you're looking at Amazon delivery, Uber drivers, transportation industry, and also the energy industry. And you know, we're in Oklahoma. That's a big thing there. But truckers are going to go out and educate those sectors on what to look for, how to identify trafficking victims, what to do if you identify them, all of this, quite a bit to take on. G6 Hospitality, they're associated with Motel 6. They have their own trafficking group, and they're going to come in and train our hotels and motels. So you're looking at hospitality industry.
Like the one right across the street over here.
Yep. So, but they have a group, they will train everybody. So they are really, really good at it, well respected in the industry. The Association of Certified Financial Crime Specialists, we're partnering with them. They come in and train financial institutions, banks, credit unions, train law enforcement.
Taylor, she got trained by them. So
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
So you know them?
Yes.
Excellent,
Yes.
okay. Great people.
Yep.
Excellent. My friend Erin over there, she's a former CIA, so she was exposed to a lot of trafficking, a lot of other things around the world, and really has a soft place in her heart for this. So they're coming in and doing a lot of training here. Collective Liberty out of Texas, they're doing a lot of trafficking work in Texas, and now they're coming here in Oklahoma to help us set this up. The big one that really allowed me to go forward with all of this was Skull Games. So Skull Games is they're a veteran-founded and run organization that focuses on sex trafficking, and their lane, they don't do the investigations, but they do the open source. So when we look at human trafficking, it's a little different than most crimes out here. I mean, drugs, you know, we're all familiar with drug use and drug dealers, but you don't see a whole lot of them advertising, hey, if you want fentanyl, if you want this, come here, you know, call me at this number. You don't really see that for good reason, but you do see sex ads, and you'll see maybe a picture, may or may not be the girl or the guy, but you'll see a picture of the victim, and then you'll see a narrative describing what they do, and then you'll have a phone number, an email, or a way to set up that physical contact. And that's how they market their goods. And you hear this a lot, that drug dealers can make a lot of money. But when they get drugs in, they divide them up, distribute them. They can only sell that once. Then they got to wait for the next load to come in. When you get victims, and we always think of girls, but sometimes there are guys involved, boys, those can be sold over and over and over again, multiple times a day for years. And I believe the International Department of Labor, I would have to go look at whoever did the study, $236 billion a year industry is what they estimated this at being, $236 billion. That's massive, big money. So Skull Games will come in and build targeting packets, or intelligence packets, I think is the more acceptable way now of talking about them, but they will identify traffickers and they will identify victims. And they will build those packets up based on open source intelligence. That will help law enforcement then be able to execute and prioritize who we're going to go after, how we're going to do operations, and different things like that. Now, law enforcement may be able to do that, but Skull Games can knock down the amount of time it takes, because this is all they do. With law enforcement, unless you've got a dedicated analyst, which is pretty rare on human trafficking, it can take hours and hours and hours to do one. So Skull Games is coming in this year to train law enforcement and also provide operational support on the intelligence side of it. And then finally, we've got Equitas coming in to do, and Collective Liberty to train prosecutors. So when we start looking at this in the broad spectrum,
Yeah.
it's not just a law enforcement problem. We will never arrest our way out of this. But if we do arrest, and we should, we need to go after the people who are profiting off the misery of these other people. We still have to cross the finish line, so to speak, so you're looking at prosecution. We're also going to be driving up our victims. So when we identify victims, we have to have a place for them to go. And this isn't like a domestic violence victim. It's not like a, something that's going to be a little more short term. These are people who have often been controlled for, some of them since childhood. They've been manipulated. They have trauma bonds. They struggle just to get through the day. And they've got substance abuse issues. There's a lot that we really need to provide for them. So you're looking at long-term stays. And here in Tulsa, we have the Spring, one of the key groups that we work with here.
Wow.
Yeah.
You switch?
Yeah, just real quick.
Tell me about community builds.
So, we're shining a light, and a lot of this happens in plain sight, right in front of everybody. What does labor trafficking look like? Looks like people going to work. From the outside, just passing by, you look over, you see people going to work, don't think much about it. So trafficking can be really difficult, and a lot of the marketing, a lot of the sales have gone online, so you really don't see a lot. I was in New York City this week. I was with 2 survivors and a few other people. We've got a pretty close group, pretty tight group of experts that we run with. So we're eating at a very nice restaurant. She came back to the table. She said, "I just saw three victims who are being trafficked in the ladies' room."
Who said that?
One of the survivors.
One of the survivors?
Yes. And I asked her, I said, and she said, I think that's their trafficker over there. He's pretty drunk, but he's just sitting at the table, not making problems or anything. But the girls were in the ladies' room, and I said, "Where do you think they are? What do you think would happen if we tried to intervene?" And she said, "Oh, no, he's treating them now. They're coming in dressed nice. They're in here at a nice steakhouse, and they're living the life, or so they think. They're still on the stages there where they don't really understand what's going on with them." But anyway, she was able to then go and look on one of the, I think it was Skip the Game. She found one of the girls on there because she had really detailed tattoos, but she went ahead and looked at the ads that had been posted over the last few days and was able to identify one of them. So when you think about that, and this was a nice restaurant, not the place where you think you'd run into somebody, but there they were. Nobody else in the restaurant would have thought anything about it. But that survivor, having come from that life, knew right off.
I keep running into questions through our conversation.
Sure.
And how often do survivors help you guys in your investigation?
A lot. I can't emphasize this enough. Without survivors, we would be dead in the water. And you'll hear words like victim-centered, trauma-informed. There are a lot of insensitivities that law enforcement, you get guys like me. I've never been a victim of anything in my life. I'm a big, straight, white guy with a law degree. I don't know what it's like to be a victim. I don't know how they're going to perceive us as law enforcement. I had one victim say, she was trafficked by her mom from the age of 8. She tried to run away, and guess who mom showed up with to come get her? A cop. So her perception of that was, well, they're working with working with mom. I'm never going to say anything or do anything. And the traffickers know how to exploit situations. They know how to and when you're dealing, especially with your own kids, you know how to control what they're doing and all of that. Sorry, what was that question?
I just asked how helpful are victims
Oh,
in
yeah.
investigation?
They're incredibly, well, so victims, survivors, survivors are people who have been victims and then they have gotten, you never really get over the trauma. This week I was with 2 survivors and I saw they were speaking on their experiences and the after effects that really hit them hard. When people want these survivors to come up and they tell me your story, just expose all your trauma to the world, and these survivors understand this has to happen in order for us to move forward and be able to identify. But survivors, if we didn't work with them and we didn't have them, we would get nowhere. They're the ones that have lived this life. And that's another thing, when you talk to survivors, or the victims that are in there, they call it the life. It's the life. When you talk to traffickers, it's the game. If that gives you kind of the mindset of what they're looking at. It's traffickers or the offenders, the abusers, the predators, they're talking about the game. They've written books on it. And the victims call it the life. And that really sets up a lot.
I've got 2 more questions.
Sure.
One of them, just on an earlier note, which that'd be good to, I guess, enunciate for those who might not know what coyotes are, because I think when I hear coyote, something I'm going to have my dog chase off.
Yes.
What is that?
Well, you hear different pronunciations, coyote or coyote, or they're smugglers. They're people who are paid to bring, they're people who are paid to bring people across the border. So I worked for the Border Patrol. I was in San Diego sector back in the 90s. And there would be people who were paid. They knew the routes. They knew, well, I don't want to disclose a whole lot on this, but they knew where the tunnels were. They knew where the routes were that would be where you'd be less likely to see an agent, or maybe patrol routes or patrol timings. So you have these people that knew how to get a group from point A to point B somewhere inside in the interior. Then they had a network set up when they would deliver those people inside to their next transportation, or they would take them further on into the interior.
So, on this back of this case, this man who was arrested in Oklahoma, he might have been maybe part of that network of transportation because he was transporting 6 or 7 people.
It very well could have been. I don't know anything about the case, but yeah, if this person was arrested in connection with the smuggling of these people, then yes, either the person bringing them across into the country or one of the interior drivers, another delivery mechanism. Once you get these people in, then if they have may bring them into a hub, and then from there they'll go out to other locations where agriculture or slaughterhouses or whatever it may be.
How far up could coyotes come, or do they just stay at the border?
As far as they can get. Most of the time they're familiar with the routes, they're familiar with Border Patrol, the patrol timings and how they patrol. Is this a horse? Are these people on horseback? Are they likely to come up on 4-wheelers or whatever? So you have a lot of surveillance on the Border Patrol. Now they're using, or they've been using drones for a long time. A couple of drones have crashed on our side, and when you look at them, you can see they're way up high, and you're looking down on Border Patrol activity, and sometimes you'll actually see a Border Patrol helicopter pass in between, so you know those drones are up pretty high. So technology is being used in both sides for a lot of intel gathering. And then that is then going over to the coyotes, the people that are transporting them in.
This sounds like a war front to me.
Right.
Is that a way to describe this?
Oh, in many ways, yes. Especially now with all the things going on with immigration, but you still have to remember the people that are being smuggled in generally are people coming over looking for a job, looking for work. They're victimized, they're raped, they're beaten, bad things happen to them on the way over. If law enforcement starts closing in, Border Patrol starts coming in, or other law enforcement, those smugglers, they'll bail on them. You see a lot of deaths in the summer from heat exhaustion in the back of these trucks. You see when they try to cross the desert, they will run out of water and and die in the middle of nowhere. So, you know, there's a lot of dangers on the victim side, the people who are being smuggled over. And then there's a lot of exploitation over here, including some forced criminality and things that U.S. citizens would be more concerned about rather than people coming over to get a job.
So it's possible to assume that coyotes could move in and out of Oklahoma?
Absolutely, yes, they do. Every state.
Every state?
Every state.
Even New York, where you just came from?
Oh yeah, there's jobs there too. There's a need. There's a need for labor. There's a need for, so in the U.S., so Polaris is an organization that has the hotline, has a lot of things to do with human trafficking. They take calls. They looked over a lot of reports and a lot of other activity, and they found 25 different typologies of human traffickers. When you look at modern slavery in the UK, there are 17 different typologies there that they've identified. So labor trafficking is a massive, massive problem here. And it's a massive industry, a lot of money in it. And just in Oklahoma, if you just look at the cannabis industry, millions and millions of dollars in cash flowing through Oklahoma out into other parts of the country and then out into other parts of the world.
Which makes Oklahoma, I could say, a hot spot.
Yeah, New York, they have agriculture. New Jersey's got agriculture. A lot of places that we don't think of. And the cannabis industry all across the states is a big draw to forced labor or labor trafficking.
That sums up about everything I have. Is there you said you also focus on education for this, though. So is there anything else you feel that we haven't covered that's worth talking about?
So the community builds. That's where I was. Yes. One of the things I was wanting to do. As we build this out, we're training law enforcement. We're training the transportation, energy sectors, hospitality, prosecutors. We're also going in and training schools. We have we had a faith leaders summit on the 21st of last month right here in Tulsa, and that turned out, it was very popular. We had a lot of people attend. It wasn't just faith leaders, it was community leaders and everybody else. So we've decided to shift that over. So there's a group, a fairly new NGO here, Unite for Freedom, that is taking the lead in this and building community events. So in Jinx, on March 28th, we will have that from 9 to 12. I can get you more information on that on location, but when you really look at what's going on with trafficking, I have worked all over the world. And here in the U.S., you'll see a lot of states and a lot of groups that are trying to do what I refer to as a top-down. We'll pull in all these experts, put this panel together. They'll come up with things that need to be done. They'll have meetings and form, write white papers and do all this stuff. What I want to do is to build from the ground up. I think this is going to be a street fight. Law enforcement can't do it alone. We can't arrest our way out of this, just impossible. So what I want to do is engage, educate, and empower communities. So Jinx, the mayor of Jinx, Mayor Box stepped up. We got Broken Arrow on deck to have the next one, but they came and said, we want to do something. So what we're going to do is come in, educate whoever wants to show up at these. We're also going to give the mayors a toolbox that can then go to the schools, that can go to their school resource officers, that can go to their businesses. Business owners need to know what trafficking looks like, what indicators to look for and watch for. If you're in agriculture, if you have livestock, you really need to know what you're looking at. If you're a big meat processing company, like I left Northwest Arkansas, there are a lot of big organizations there. I'll just leave it at that. They use third-party vendors to come in and clean the machinery that's used to kill livestock. A lot of hazardous chemicals that are being used in there. Mississippi, there was a young man who came over, probably through a smuggler. He was 16, but he was killed in dangerous machinery and had an ID that said he was 33 years old. So yeah, every state is, smuggling goes on everywhere. You bring them in and they've got to be delivered wherever they're going in a lot of ways. So there are dangers, there are things to look out for. So when you come in at the community level, you start educating community level, and then we go to the next community. We start building this mesh network where it's harder and harder for traffickers to hide, where we teach people what to look for, how to report it, what to do, and accountability. I think that's going to be the way, that's how we're going to do it in Oklahoma. We're going to build this from the ground up, one community at a time.
I like that. That sounds like we need to go to a few of these events.
What's that?
I said it sounds like we need to go to a few of these events.
Please do. I think it would be, we have some key people that are coming in, and we're actually drawing from the community.
Really?
To lead these. So yeah, I'll show you the flyer here in a minute that was just put out for the Jinx event. So
Okay. Sounds
it'd
good.
be great if you guys come up.
That's all right. Well, does that sum that up for you? I think it
Yeah.
sums up for me.
I think so.
Perfect. All right. We can close it up. Thank you very much.